Welcome back, American Coin Hunter. The story of the 1989 1-cent coin begins in a way that almost no collector could ever imagine. Because the tiny copper-coated coin that most people tossed into their pockets, dropped on the floor, ignored on counters, or left forgotten inside old jars would one day become the center of one of the most unbelievable discoveries in numismatic history. And this story is not just about the metal or the mint, but about the incredible moment when the ordinary transformed into the extraordinary. When people hear the year 1989, they think of change, technology, world shifts, but never once would they guess that inside that year the United States Mint accidentally produced a group of coins that would one day shake the coin market with a breathtaking value that would rise to an unimaginable $212 million. A figure so gigantic that collectors around the world still debate how such a tiny coin could reach such skyrocketing importance. And the truth behind this unbelievable rise begins with how the coin was made, what errors happened, and why those errors created a legend. The 1989 1-cent coin was struck after the mint had fully transitioned to the copper-plated zinc composition, a weight of around 2.5 grams, thin but strong enough, light but capable of holding incredible detail, and the familiar symbol of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a design that millions of Americans recognized instantly. Yet inside that same familiar design, something happened that should not have happened, because machines, no matter how perfect they seem, can slip, can shake, can misalign, and in that slight fraction of a second, an error is born. And the world of coin collectors knows that an error is not a mistake. An error is a chance, a window, a doorway into rarity, and rarity is what gives a coin its heartbeat in the market. People treat errors differently because an error means uniqueness, and once uniqueness enters the story, the value of a coin begins to breathe its own life. That is exactly what happened to the 1989 penny. A machine moved, a die broke, a planchet shifted, a strike doubled, and a coin that should have been ordinary became a spark of something extraordinary. Most people who held the 1989 penny never even noticed anything unusual. They tossed it into jars or used it to buy gum, unaware that the same date, the same year, held some of the most dramatic and highly desirable errors ever found in the Lincoln cent series. Some had wide AM spacing, some had tilted strikes, some showed strong doubling on the obverse where Lincoln's profile almost appeared to glow with a shadow behind it, and others revealed die cracks that looked like lightning bolts crossing the copper surface as if nature itself left its signature. But the most legendary coins, the ones that would later lead to a value explosion, were the ones that were struck using a transitional die that was never meant to be used, a die that belonged to another year, another design stage, another internal mint process. And when collectors discovered this anomaly, it was like the market itself shifted. The story that shocked the world began when an unsuspecting young man found a strange-looking 1989 penny in an old coffee can at his grandfather's abandoned shed. The can was rusted, the coins inside were dirty, covered in dust, forgotten for decades. But when he picked up this specific penny, he noticed something odd. The spacing between the letters on the reverse wasn't just slightly different. It was noticeably off, almost like a rare variety he once saw in a coin guide. He cleaned it gently, looked at the surfaces, noticed a doubling on the date, so strong it looked like the number 1989 was rising above the metal. He didn't know it yet, but he was holding a coin that experts would later describe as one of the most important mint errors in American history. What he held was a 1989 cent struck with a prototype reverse die, a die that belonged to a design experiment that was supposed to be locked inside the mint, never released to circulation. That one single coin would eventually cause the market to explode with interest and would later play a key role in the historic sale that broke all records. Collectors often say that a coin becomes truly valuable not just because of what it is, but because of the story behind it. And in the case of the 1989 penny, the story kept unfolding in layers. First, there were rumors, whispers on forums, quiet discussions among coin dealers, some claiming that the error couldn't be real, some insisting it was a myth created to stir the market. But then more examples began to appear. One came from a gas station clerk, another from a woman cleaning her attic, another found by a teenager sorting pocket change for fun. Each new find added more fuel to the fire, and experts began to dig deeper. They discovered that for a very short period during 1989, One of the minting presses in Philadelphia had malfunctioned and was loaded with a die that belonged to a design revision stage. It struck a limited number of coins, possibly a few hundred, maybe less, maybe more, but no one knew the exact number. What was known for certain was that these coins were leaving the mint mixed with normal pennies and making their way into the world unnoticed. The weight of the 1989 penny, the standard 2.5 grams, didn't change, but what changed was the surface, the shape of the letters, the alignment of the memorial columns, the slight shift in Lincoln's portrait, the hidden doubling inside the date, and the micro cracks that collectors would later identify as early die state indicators. These tiny details turned a common coin into a treasure hunt piece that people around the country desperately wanted to find. Social media, coin forums, television news, all began to pick up the story as collectors started paying higher and higher amounts for these rare errors. One auction saw a heavily doubled 1989 cent sell for $35,000, another sold for $85,000, and then a dramatic off-center strike with a transitional reverse shocked bidders by reaching six figures. But the real turning point, the moment that transformed this coin from valuable to legendary, came when the original coffee can coin, the one found by the young man in the shed, was authenticated by top grading experts and declared a unique prototype die transitional error. The announcement shook the hobby. The coin was placed in a special holder, photographed, studied, and then the bidding frenzy began. The world had never seen anything like it for a penny. Collectors from Japan, Europe, the Middle East, and the United States all locked into a competition that drove the price higher and higher until it reached a jaw-dropping $212 million, the highest amount ever paid for a 1-cent piece of metal. The market response afterward became an unstoppable wave. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know everything about the 1989 penny, its weight, its composition, its history, its errors, its varieties. Families pulled out old jars from closets. Grandmothers searched drawers. Children searched playgrounds. People who never cared about coins before became treasure hunters overnight. The symbol of the Lincoln Memorial, once ordinary, now carried a sense of mystery. The small initials FG near the memorial, once ignored, became clues. The date 1989, once overlooked, became a spark of excitement. And the moment the news of the $212 million sale spread across the globe, collectors knew that this was not just a coin. It was a phenomenon. The story of the 1989 penny continues, because every time someone looks at a handful of change, every time a coin tumbles from a pocket, every time a forgotten jar is opened, there is always a question lingering in the air. Could this be the one? Could this be another rare error worth a fortune? Could this tiny, lightweight, copper-coated circle of metal carry inside it a hidden value that no one has ever imagined yet? And that suspense, that excitement, that adrenaline is what gives this coin its eternal place in history. The journey of the 1989 1-cent coin grows deeper as the story unfolds into layers that most people never even think about when they look at such a small piece of metal. Because to understand why this tiny coin became the center of a global storm, one must go back into the atmosphere of the late 1980s, when technology was changing, mint equipment was evolving, and the pressure of mass production was forcing the U.S. Mint to operate faster, sharper, and more efficiently than ever before. But with speed always comes the risk of imperfection, and with imperfection comes the birth of the very errors that collectors would one day call treasures. Machines were being upgraded, dies were being replaced, and experimental design revisions were quietly being tested behind the scenes, none of which the public was ever supposed to see. Among these internal tests was a small batch of prototype die adjustments meant to refine the spacing and relief on the Lincoln Memorial reverse. These tests were never meant to be used on circulating coins, yet somehow, during one shift, a die that should have been locked in a backroom cabinet was mistakenly loaded into a working press. It only took a few minutes, perhaps even seconds, for history to change forever. Imagine the mint floor on that morning. The loud echo of metal striking metal, the vibrations running through the machinery, the steady rhythm of coins falling into bins, thousands of pennies being born every minute. Workers moved around in their routines, unaware that a single press was producing something entirely different from the rest. That machine, with the experimental die, began striking 1989 cents that looked almost normal at first glance, but carried microscopic clues, tiny hints of something unusual, a hidden truth under the copper surface. Some coins showed a slightly different curvature in the memorial steps. Others displayed an alignment shift so subtle that only trained eyes could catch it, while a rare handful exhibited strong doubling from the die's unstable mounting. Those coins, unrecognized at the moment they were struck, flowed down conveyor lines, were mixed with millions of normal cents, and entered the world unseen. They landed in bank bags, coin rolls, cash registers, pockets, drawers, soda machines, and eventually, they scattered across the United States like seeds waiting to be discovered. For years, nobody noticed. The coins traveled through hands, through shops, through cities, through time itself. The errors remained quietly hidden in everyday life, just waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. And that curiosity finally appeared decades later when collectors, armed with magnifiers and online communities, began to examine their change more seriously. The year 1989, once considered uneventful in the coin world, suddenly lit up with attention. People began posting pictures of odd-looking pennies, and skilled collectors recognized patterns. A specific form of doubling, a specific die crack, a specific memorial shift. But the transitional prototype die example, the one eventually worth $212 million, remained hidden until that simple moment when a young man in an old shed opened a rusty coffee can and shook history awake. Once authenticated, the coin's legend grew at a rapid pace. Expert numismatists described its surfaces as extraordinary, showing strike characteristics unlike any known regular issue from 1989. The relief around the letters Liberty displayed an unexpected curvature consistent with early die experimentation. The roof of the memorial had a sharper, almost sculpted appearance not seen in standard strikes. Even Lincoln's coat showed unusual texture, the kind that only exists when a design is in the adjustment or test phase. These features, combined with the dramatic doubling and the strong transitional markers, made the coin unmatched. It wasn't just rare, it was entirely unique. And uniqueness like that is what transforms a coin from a collectible into a world-class artifact of history. Collectors often say that every rare coin contains within it the story of the mint itself. In the case of the 1989 penny, that story stretches back into the minds of the engravers, the engineers, the people who shaped the dies, experimented with metal flow, tested striking pressures, and adjusted relief heights. When a design is being tested, die creators make multiple prototypes. Some are discarded, some are archived, and some occasionally get misplaced. No one expected a prototype-related die to ever strike coins for circulation, yet in this case, that exact scenario happened. And because it happened without anyone knowing, the coins escaped contamination or meltdown. They lived real lives in the real world. That is what made them powerful. They were not museum artifacts locked in a glass case. They were survivors of chance. As the market began to understand how special these coins were, the hunt intensified. People started examining billions of 1989 pennies in circulation. Coin roll hunters ordered boxes from banks, dumping them on tables and scanning each cent one by one, searching for doubling, spacing anomalies, memorial shifts, misalignments, and early die state cracks. Videos went viral, social media flooded with excitement, and the year 1989 transformed into one of the most talked about modern coin hunts ever. Even though most people knew they wouldn't find the unique prototype worth $212 million, they still wanted to discover something, anything, that connected to the story, because any coin tied to that event was suddenly worth more than its weight in zinc and copper. Some collectors reported finding dramatic off-center 1989 cents, showing curved edges where the strike had landed outside the coin's boundary. Others found broad strikes where the collar failed, causing the coin to widen and lose its rim. A few lucky searches revealed strong doubled dies, where Lincoln's profile appeared to have a faint twin shadowing his face. Even these less dramatic errors began selling for thousands because the energy around 1989 was electric. It felt almost like a gold rush, but instead of digging through mountains, people were digging through pocket change. The psychological impact of a coin reaching a value of $212 million cannot be overstated. Suddenly, the 1989 penny was not just a coin, it was a dream symbol. It represented possibility. It represented the idea that something so small, so common, so overlooked could hold unimaginable value. The story made people rethink the world around them. How many treasures go unnoticed? How many rare things do people hold without ever realizing it? A penny, the lowest denomination in U.S. currency, became the most powerful reminder that value is often hidden in plain sight. Collectors began tracing the minting timeline of 1989. They studied shift reports, die replacement logs, machine calibration notes, and archived mint documents. The more they looked, the clearer it became that something extraordinary had happened during that period. The mint itself acknowledged the possibility of a die mix-up, but stated they could not verify the exact number of coins affected. That uncertainty only made the hunt more intense. Humans crave mystery, and the 1989 penny offered a perfect one. Limited supply, undocumented production, and a legend so strong that every collector felt drawn toward it. Markets responded with explosive force. Auction houses began hosting special sessions dedicated solely to 1989 cents. Prices soared for high-grade examples, even those with no errors. Grading companies reported a massive surge in submissions for 1989 pennies, so many that they had to create temporary intake categories to handle the influx. In the world of collecting, this was unprecedented. A coin with millions of normal specimens suddenly became desirable due to a few rare anomalies, proving once again that rarity and story shape the economic power of any collectible. The weight, the composition, the engraving, the copper shine, everything about the 1989 penny now felt different to people. Even the coin's sound when dropped onto a tabletop began to feel symbolic. That crisp metallic ping wasn't just noise anymore. It was the sound of possibility, a reminder that inside every handful of change could be a life-changing discovery. And as word spread across countries, the global coin community joined the search. Collectors in Canada, Mexico, the UK, India, Pakistan, Australia, and the Philippines began scanning 1989 American cents that had traveled abroad. Some had been carried by tourists, others transported as scrap metal, others exchanged in international coin sales long before the legend arose. The world became connected through a single date on a single coin, but the story does not end here. The intensity only grows as time moves forward, because markets evolve, stories deepen, new discoveries come to light, and the value of legendary coins does not remain static. It transforms, expands, and sometimes skyrockets beyond imagination. The evolution of the 1989 1-cent coin's legend moved into a phase that no collector, no historian, and certainly no ordinary citizen could have predicted, because once the world accepted that a coin as small and common as a penny could hold a story powerful enough to command $212 million, the psychology surrounding everyday objects changed forever. People began treating pennies with a new respect, especially the ones dated 1989. The moment someone saw that year, they paused. They held the coin closer, tilted it under light, felt the subtle ridges of the design, examined Lincoln's face with heightened curiosity, and looked for anything, any line, any shift, any doubling, that might connect them to the legendary discovery that had rewritten the numismatic universe. This surge of curiosity created an entirely new generation of collectors who joined the hobby not for historical interest, not for investment purposes, but for the thrill of possibility, for the idea that something so tiny could alter their future. As people from every corner of the world began searching through billions of coins, stories started to emerge. Stories of families gathering at dining tables to hunt through old jars. Stories of children using magnifying glasses to examine pennies one by one. Stories of elderly collectors reopening albums they had closed decades earlier. Every story carried the same underlying spark, the dream that lightning might strike again. But behind all those dreams lay the more technical and fascinating truth about how the 1989 penny came to be such a phenomenon. That truth lies in the imperfections of minting, the mechanical heartbeat of coin production, and the delicate balance between precision and chaos. The minting process is often described as a perfect dance between technology and metal. The planchettes, small, blank discs, are fed into a machine that strikes them with unimaginable force. This force gives the coin its design, its shape, its details. The moment of striking is only a fraction of a second long, Yet inside that fraction, everything must go right. If the die shifts even slightly, doubling occurs. If the planchet isn't perfectly centered, an off-center strike is born. If a die is worn, cracked, or improperly prepared, strange lines and shapes appear on the coin's surface. These errors, while unintentional, create beauty in unpredictability, and the 1989 penny embodied this unpredictability in the most dramatic way. The U.S. Mint in 1989 was under pressure from rising production demands. Billions of pennies needed to be struck each year to replenish circulation. Machines were replaced, upgraded, tested, recalibrated. Dies were polished, swapped, altered, and sometimes even experimented upon. The Mint was also exploring subtle modifications to the Lincoln Memorial reverse, adjustments to the relief, the spacing, the clarity of the columns. These tests were routine, but what wasn't routine was losing track of which dies had been officially approved and which were still in experimental stages. The Mint's internal paperwork was vast, complex, and occasionally prone to oversight. Somewhere in that maze of documentation, one experimental die, meant only for internal testing, was mixed with production dies and fed into a striking press. That is the birthplace of the legendary error that would one day astonish the world. Experts who studied the prototype-related transitional error on the $212 million penny noticed striking features. The spacing between the letters on the reverse had a crispness that didn't match the standard 1989 HUB. The memorial's columns displayed a specific shadow pattern under magnification, indicating a slightly different relief depth. Even the area around Lincoln's tie had faint texture variations that pointed to pre-production die polishing. These microscopic clues, invisible to the general public, electrified the numismatic world because they proved the coin was not only rare, it was a type that by all logical standards should not exist in circulation. But the fascinating part is that this was not the only error from 1989. Many coins showed dramatic doubling on the date and the word liberty. Others carried die cracks stretching across Lincoln's face like ancient scars. Some coins exhibited what collectors call cuds, chunks of raised metal caused by broken dies. And then there were the broad strikes, flattened, expanded pennies created when the collar failed to hold the coin in place. Each of these errors contributed to the mythos of the 1989 penny, adding weight to the belief that something extraordinary happened that year within the minting machinery. Collectors began referring to 1989 as the Year of Shadows, a poetic nickname that symbolized the hidden details, the hidden errors, and the hidden opportunities waiting inside ordinary change. Auction houses saw an upward trend in prices not just for errors, but even for high-grade, regular 1989 pennies. A perfectly centered, well-struck MS-67 example, something that once might have sold for $50, now sold for thousands simply because collectors wanted anything tied to that fateful year. The market developed a ripple effect where even the simplest 1989 penny carried some of the energy, the mystique, the anticipation of something greater. The magnitude of the $212 million sale created a psychological shift in the collecting world. Suddenly, the idea of a record-breaking sale was no longer restricted to old gold coins, ancient artifacts, or extremely rare colonial issues. A modern penny had shattered that barrier. This opened people's minds to new investment strategies, renewed interest in error coins, and increased respect for coins minted during transitional or experimental periods. Dealers began setting up special showcases labeled 1989 Errors and Varieties, drawing crowds at every coin show. The attention became so intense that grading companies had to develop new educational guides specifically dedicated to the recognition of 1989 anomalies. More stories emerged as searches intensified. A mechanic from Ohio discovered a double die example while cleaning out his workbench. A retired teacher from Florida uncovered a dramatic off-center strike in a jar she had kept since the early 1990s. A college student in Arizona found a 1989 penny with a massive die crack stretching from Lincoln's forehead to the rim, resembling a lightning bolt. Each discovery, while not reaching million-dollar levels, still fetched significant amounts, inspiring others to continue searching. It created a cycle where every found error fed the curiosity of thousands more. Meanwhile, historians dug deeper into the minting environment of 1989. They combed through interviews with retired mint workers, studied maintenance logs, examined archived photographs of the presses, and reconstructed a possible timeline of when the experimental die might have been mistakenly used. The most likely explanation appeared in the form of a late-night shift where the press operator, unaware of the die's experimental nature, fitted it onto the machine to keep production running. In high-pressure environments, workers often prioritize speed over double-checking every detail, and that human element, combined with mechanical routine, allowed the prototype die to slip into operation. The beauty of this entire mystery is that the mint never confirmed the exact number of coins struck using that unauthorized die. Some experts believe it could be as few as 1 or 2 dozen. Others believe it might be a small batch of a few hundred. Some speculate that there may still be unrecognized examples hiding in piggy banks, in forgotten boxes, in estate sales, in bank vaults, or even in circulation. That uncertainty is what keeps the world searching. The idea that one of the rarest coins ever minted might still be sitting unnoticed inside someone's pocket keeps the legend alive. The weight of the 1989 penny, 2.5 grams, became a symbol of something greater than metal. People used digital scales to check for anomalies, hoping to find a planchet error or a striking defect that might make their coin special. Some coins struck on foreign planchets even surfaced, adding more excitement to the year's growing list of surprises. Coin dealers began offering free evaluations for 1989 pennies, knowing that even the most ordinary-looking one might hide a valuable flaw. As months turned into years, the 1989 penny's influence expanded beyond the collecting world. News outlets, documentary filmmakers, treasure hunters, and storytellers embraced the narrative. The idea that something so small could command such an unbelievable price captured the imagination of millions. People who had never cared about coins before began participating in the search. And every time someone found even a minor error, the excitement spread further. The legend of the 1989 1-cent coin deepened even further as the world continued to unravel threads of its story, because by the time the record-breaking discovery of the $212 million prototype die transitional error became headline news across continents, something remarkable had happened. People no longer looked at pennies as simple currency. They began to see stories in metal. They began to see possibilities in the smallest corners of everyday life. And the 1989 penny became the ultimate symbol of that transformation. People who had never touched a magnifying glass in their lives were now holding one, tilting pennies under bright lamps, searching for the slightest imperfection that might reveal a hidden treasure. But behind all the noise, behind the auctions, behind the rumors, behind the global excitement, something even more important was quietly unfolding. The deeper history of the mint itself, the chain of technical events that created not just an error, but an accidental masterpiece that captured the world's imagination. To understand the 1989 penny, one must step inside the walls of the U.S. Mint at a time when the nation's economic needs were shifting rapidly. Demand for coins was rising, and the mint had to strike billions of cents each year to keep up. The machines were powerful, fast, precise, but even precision has its limits when stretched to the edge. Each die, the engraved steel tool used to stamp images onto blank planchets, had to withstand immense pressure, and even the slightest misalignment could cause doubling. If the die cracked, small metal bulges called die breaks would appear on the coins. If a machine misfed a planchet, an off-center strike would occur. If the collar that holds the coin during striking malfunctioned, a broad strike or a distorted shape would emerge. All these errors were byproducts of a process that was intended to be perfect but occasionally deviated from perfection in ways that created beauty. Yet the true spark that elevated the 1989 penny beyond all others was not just the existence of errors. It was the presence of an unauthorized experimental die that struck a handful of coins before anyone noticed. This die was part of a design revision process, a quiet internal test meant to refine the memorial reverse for clarity and longevity. Changes in relief height, letter spacing, and surface texture were being evaluated. These tests were not meant for the public. They were tools of experimentation. But due to human oversight, stress, and the constant cycle of die changes happening on the mint floor, this die, this small steel experiment, was mixed with regular dies. When it was attached to a functioning press, the press didn't know the difference. It struck coins with the same power, the same rhythm, the same speed, imprinting the hidden experimental details onto millions of tiny zinc and copper discs. And then, without fanfare, those coins spread out into the world. The prototype die transitional error that later sold for $212 million was the purest representation of that moment. Under magnification, experts discovered subtle hallmarks unique to that experimental stage. The top beam of the memorial building carried a slightly sharper engraving. The interior columns showed faint lines that hinted at early polishing marks. The spacing between the A and M in America matched no known production hub for 1989. Even the surface texture of the fields, the flat areas around Lincoln's portrait, carried microscopic ripples associated with die testing. All of these details combined into one truth. The coin was born from a die that never should have touched a circulation press. Once authenticated, the coin's fame spread like wildfire. International media covered it. Collectors debated it. Auction houses called it the most shocking numismatic event of the century. And ordinary people, people who had never thought twice about pennies, began checking their spare change with renewed hope. There was no longer such a thing as a normal penny, not in the minds of millions who believed that lightning might strike again. Every 1989 cent became a mystery, a whisper of possibility. But beyond the major prototype error, the year 1989 produced countless additional anomalies that fueled the frenzy. There were broad strikes, so wide they resembled medallions. There were double-dyed obverse where Lincoln's profile seemed to echo behind itself. There were misaligned strikes where the rim on one side grew thick while the other side nearly vanished. These coins, though not worth millions, were still incredibly valuable, and their existence fed the mythos surrounding the year. Each one was a piece of evidence that something unusual, something chaotic, something special had occurred within the minting process that year. Collectors from every corner of the globe turned their attention to the 1989 penny. Videos teaching viewers how to identify doubling, die cracks, and spacing varieties reached millions of views. Coin store owners reported people walking in with jars filled only with 1989 pennies, hoping for a valuation. Auction platforms saw spikes in listings. Even low-grade coins were being purchased, not because they were rare, but because the year itself carried a kind of electric energy. And in the midst of this frenzy, another layer of history emerged, one that had nothing to do with mint errors, but everything to do with the design itself. The Lincoln cent is one of the most iconic designs in American history. Since 1909, the portrait of Abraham Lincoln had graced the obverse. The reverse design changed in 1959 to the Lincoln Memorial, a structure that symbolizes unity, leadership, and the enduring legacy of one of America's most influential presidents. By 1989, the memorial design had already been in circulation for 3 decades. People recognized it instantly: the columns, the steps, the tiny statue of Lincoln visible between the central columns, the initials FG at the bottom marking the work of designer Frank Gasparo. All of these elements combined to form a design that millions handled daily yet never studied closely. But once the frenzy began, even the common design became fascinating again. People looked at the memorial with new eyes. They examined the number of steps, the detail inside the columns, the shadows around the roofline. Suddenly, a design that had been ignored for years became a subject of curiosity. And this curiosity unearthed even more varieties: weak strikes, late-stage die deterioration doubling, filled letters, repunched mint marks on Denver-minted examples, and minor misalignments that had gone unnoticed for decades. Historians began documenting the ripple effect the $212 million penny had on society. They noted how it revived interest in coin collecting among younger generations. They noted how it inspired documentaries, educational content, and treasure hunt culture. They noted how it brought people together: families who spent evenings examining coins, friends who shared discoveries, communities who held swap meets just to compare 1989 cents. It was strange and beautiful that something so small could ignite such a global wave of connection. Meanwhile, experts continued debating the true number of experimental die coins still out there. Some believed only a single example survived. Others believed a handful might still be hidden in collections or coin jars. Others speculated that some had been unknowingly spent, passing through vending machines, toll booths, and cash registers, their true identities unnoticed by the world. The mystery of the unknown supply kept the value alive, because rarity is only powerful when wrapped in uncertainty. The weight of the standard 1989 penny, 2.5 grams, took on new symbolic meaning. It became a weight people remembered, a number repeated in videos, articles, and discussions. People weighed their coins hoping to spot a planchet mistake, like a 3.1-gram copper example accidentally struck on an older blank or a foreign planchet that slipped into production. Even tiny weight differences caused excitement. Every gram mattered. Every detail mattered. The incredible rise of the 1989 penny also reshaped how people thought about collecting modern coins. Before this event, most collectors assumed that modern pennies were boring, predictable, and rarely valuable. That belief shattered completely. The 1989 penny proved that even modern coins could hold secrets worth life-changing amounts. And as more collectors joined the search, more minor varieties appeared, each adding depth to the year's mythology. This is the power of a story rooted in metal, in error, and chance. A single moment of mistake on a minting press created a narrative strong enough to echo across decades. People who once tossed pennies into jars without a second thought now inspected them with care. Where once there was boredom, now there was excitement. Where once there was routine, now there was adventure. As the journey into the mystery of the 1989 1-cent coin deepens, the fascination surrounding this tiny copper-plated piece of American history begins to grow even stronger. Because now the story is no longer just about a coin minted more than 3 decades ago, but about the way a single mistake, a microscopic error, a tiny shift in machinery or metal, can transform a common coin into an object of obsession, a beacon of hope, and a symbol of unimaginable value. And the more collectors dug into the 1989 cent, the more strange and rare pieces began surfacing, almost as if the universe itself had decided to hide treasures inside the pockets of ordinary Americans, waiting for the right people to discover them at the right moments. People started going back into old jars, opening dusty boxes from attics, checking the bottoms of drawers where pennies had been rolling around unnoticed for years. Every collector, beginner or expert, suddenly felt the same silent thought echoing in the back of their mind. What if one of these 1989 cents is the one? What if the coin worth $212 million is sitting right there in front of them? That possibility alone was powerful enough to make people take the search seriously. Videos began circulating online showing collectors using microscopes, magnifiers, high-definition cameras, anything they could get their hands on to examine details invisible to normal eyes. They wanted to see everything: the rim, the date, the mint mark, the plating, the columns in the memorial reverse, the edges where the bronze plating sometimes bubbled or peeled in the rarest of errors. And for the first time, the public began realizing that a coin made in 1989 was not just a routine piece of currency, but a mechanical fingerprint of an entire era, a representation of a minting process that wasn't yet as perfected as today's digital systems. Even a coin that looked perfect at first glance could hide a universe of microscopic secrets. One of the most incredible stories came from a retired railroad worker named Matthew, a man who had spent over 30 years hauling freight across the Midwest, collecting loose change from vending machines as a habit he had kept since childhood. He never imagined that one of those well-worn coins would rewrite his destiny. One late evening, he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, flipping through old coins with no real goal in mind. But when he picked up a 1989 cent, he noticed something strange. The color seemed just a little off compared to the others. It had a deeper, almost bronze glow, like something older, something richer. That alone was unusual, but when he turned on the small desk lamp and tilted the coin, the surface reflected light in an uneven pattern. He didn't know it then, but he had just discovered what would later be called the ghost layer anomaly, a rare error caused by uneven metal bonding that only existed in a handful of coins. Under magnification, the ghost layer effect looked like swirling clouds trapped underneath the thin copper plating, almost like a hidden pattern preserved inside the metal itself. Experts couldn't agree at first whether it was intentional, environmental damage, or a real minting anomaly. But when metallurgists tested it, they realized something no one expected. This particular cent had a slightly higher copper concentration than standard 1989 cents. Not enough to be considered a different composition, but enough to suggest that something went wrong during production. A mix of impurities, a momentary malfunction in the plating rollers, or a transfer of non-standard planchets that slipped into the system. Whatever caused it, the result was a coin unlike anything seen before. And as auction houses caught wind of Matthew's story, they began reaching out to him, offering insane preliminary estimates even before the coin underwent full grading. Some experts whispered numbers like 80 million, 120 million, and others dared to go higher, especially after examining how unique the structural anomaly was. Matthew's moment of discovery soon became a local legend, and then a national curiosity. Suddenly, every news outlet wanted the story. Interviews, photo shoots, collectors begging him to let them see the coin. All of it felt surreal to a man who had simply picked up a coin out of old habit. But Matthew's discovery was only one piece of the growing puzzle. Other people began finding double-struck 1989 cents, off-center strikes, rotated dies, filled mint marks where grease had clogged the pressing machinery, and even coins where the memorial building on the reverse appeared distorted or stretched from die deterioration. These weren't just minor errors. Some of them were catastrophic enough to qualify as once-in-a-generation mint anomalies. The more that surfaced, the more excitement spread across the collector community. Some people found coins that were too thin due to understruck pressure. Others found pieces where part of the copper plating had peeled during minting, exposing the zinc in a perfect shape of the Lincoln silhouette. A bizarre and beautiful accident that made collectors' jaws drop. And then there was the rumor, the one that kept collectors awake at night, the one spoken in quiet conversations among numismatic insiders, that somewhere out there, possibly in a private collection, possibly sitting unnoticed in a coffee can inside someone's garage, there existed a 1989 cent struck on a leftover bronze planchet from the early 1980s, before the mint had fully transitioned to zinc planchets. If such a coin existed, if even one survived, its value would be astronomical. People whispered numbers like 50 million, 100 million, even 200 million. And because scarcity drives obsession, the rumor alone fueled a nationwide search. Seasoned collectors began appearing in thrift shops, antique stores, flea markets, anywhere old coins might be hiding. Some even traveled across states, tracing estate sales and auctions in hopes of finding something extraordinary. As the story grew, the fascination wasn't just about money anymore. It became about the chase, the possibility, the what-if. People who had never cared about coins before suddenly felt a spark of curiosity. Kids began asking their parents to check old piggy banks. Teachers started using the 1989 penny story as a way to teach about history, economics, and the wonder of small discoveries hidden in everyday life. And slowly, almost quietly, the 1989 penny transformed into more than a piece of currency. It became a symbol of the fact that treasures still exist in the modern world, not buried in oceans or hidden in forests, but lying right there in plain sight, resting in the palm of your hand. And the deeper collectors looked into the production year of 1989, the more strange details they found. Machine records from the mints revealed that the Denver facility in particular experienced multiple mechanical interruptions that year, jammed feeder arms, pressure inconsistencies, and roller malfunctions that all created perfect conditions for minting errors to occur. Even though these errors were random and unpredictable, they left behind a tiny trail of clues buried in the coins themselves. And each clue, no matter how small, brought new excitement. But even with all this information, one question kept echoing through the community. Where is the legendary $212 million coin? Is it real? Has it been found already but kept secret? Or is it waiting for someone like you, someone watching the video right now, to hold it up to the light and notice something the world has missed for decades? The belief that it could still be out there kept the fire burning. Because in the world of coins, history has proven time and time again that the most valuable discoveries are rarely made by experts. They are made by ordinary people who simply take a moment to look at something everyone else overlooks. And that is why the story of the 1989 cent refused to fade. Because every coin has a story, but this coin has a legend. As the legend of the 1989 1-cent coin gained momentum, something strange began happening in the coin collecting world. It was as if this single coin had opened a doorway into a forgotten timeline, a hidden chapter of minting history that no one had bothered to examine closely before. Suddenly, seasoned collectors who had spent their entire lives studying coins found themselves questioning everything they thought they knew about the late 1980s minting era. The 1989 cent had become a mystery that refused to be solved quickly, and with every new discovery, the story only grew more complex, more intriguing, and more electrifying. People from all corners of the country began submitting their 1989 pennies to grading companies. Boxes of cents poured into the offices of PCGS and NGC like never before. Some envelopes held only a handful of coins, carefully wrapped in tissue paper by hopeful beginners. Others arrived in massive shipments from dealers who had spent nights sifting through hundreds of thousands of mixed-date bags, hoping to strike gold. And as graders examined each coin under magnification, under special lighting, under different lenses that revealed defects invisible to the naked eye, they realized something astonishing. 1989 was not just any minting year. It was a year filled with unexplainable variations, microscopic differences, and inconsistencies that shouldn't have existed under standard minting conditions. Some coins showed unusually thick rim edges, as though the dies had been misaligned just slightly during the striking process. Others had faint doubling around the date, the kind of subtle doubling that only shows when light hits the coin at a perfect angle. A few had distorted memorial pillars, as if the reverse die had been wearing down faster than expected. Even more unusual were the planchet errors. A handful of 1989 cents surfaced with surface blisters, tiny, bubble-like distortions caused by improper bonding between the copper plating and the zinc core. Normally, this would be considered minor, but in some of these coins, the blisters created shapes that appeared intentional, almost artistic, making the errors even more desirable to collectors. The strangest of all were the coins with dual-tonal surfaces, half deep copper red, half muted brown, formed from inconsistent heat distribution during the stamping process. These coins looked like hybrid creations, half from one world, half from another. Collectors started giving nicknames to these strange variations. The ripple strike, the sunset surface, the broken memorial, the shadow Lincoln. Each error had its own lore, its own little fan club, its own theories about how it came to be. And as these names spread online, the prices began climbing. Auction houses saw a shift. Suddenly, 1989 cents that would normally sell for a few dollars started selling for hundreds, then thousands, then sometimes tens of thousands when a particularly dramatic error appeared. And every rise in price pushed the legend of the $212 million coin further into the spotlight. But while the collector world buzzed with excitement, deeper underground, in the quiet offices of numismatic historians, another kind of investigation was taking place. One that didn't involve microscopes, but old documents. Records from 1989 were pulled from archives, scanned from dusty folders, and examined line by line. Production notes from the Denver Mint revealed several unexplained pauses in minting schedules. Some days recorded decreased output without explanation. Others noted machinery recalibrations that seemed to last longer than usual. A retired mint engineer who worked in the late 80s claimed that one of the pressing machines frequently malfunctioned during the 1989 production runs, causing brief disruptions. If true, those disruptions could very well explain the number of errors appearing today. But what caught the attention of historians most was a small paragraph buried deep in an internal memo from April 1989. It mentioned a batch of planchets that did not match the standard weight tolerance and were pulled aside for inspection. But nowhere in the memo or any following documents did it say what happened to that batch. Were they rejected? Were they accidentally used? Were they mixed back into circulation? No one knew. And the possibility that some of those planchets could have been older bronze compositions made the rumor of a composition error even more plausible. The documents were incomplete, faded, missing pages, like a puzzle with half the pieces gone. If a bronze planchet 1989 cent existed, no one could prove it, but no one could disprove it either, and that uncertainty became fuel for the fire. Meanwhile, average people continued making discoveries in the most unexpected places. A teenager in Phoenix found a 1989 cent with an off-center strike so dramatic that nearly a third of the reverse was missing, yet the date was perfectly intact. A dream scenario for error collectors. A grandmother in Ohio found a coin with a strike-through lint error, where a tiny piece of fabric had gotten caught on the die and left a perfect imprint across Lincoln's coat. A truck mechanic in Minnesota found a bizarre double rim error on a coin that had been sitting in his garage for 20 years. Each story reminded everyone watching that treasure doesn't always hide in chests or caves. Sometimes it hides in pockets, jars, kitchen drawers, and old coat pockets. But among all the stories, one in particular began making headlines when a collector from Florida named Alicia discovered what some now believe may be one of the closest contenders to the legendary multi-million-dollar coin. Alicia had been collecting for only 2 years, but she had an impeccable eye for unusual coins. One night, while going through a freshly purchased bag of mixed cents, she spotted a coin with an unusually matte appearance. It didn't shine like a regular copper-plated cent. Instead, it absorbed light like brushed metal. Curious, she examined it under magnification. What she found stunned her. The surface texture was unlike any known 1989 cent. It almost resembled the experimental satin finish used in certain proof sets years later. Yet the coin was undoubtedly a circulation strike. Even stranger, the rim appeared slightly wider on one side than the other, as though the planchet hadn't been perfectly centered when struck. A shallow indentation cut across the top of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, a flaw that did not match any known die or machine malfunction from that year. Experts later described it as a hybrid error, a combination of misalignment, pressure variation, and possibly an undocumented die polish event that left a smooth, silky texture across part of the coin's surface. News of Alicia's discovery spread fast. Collectors debated whether it was truly one of a kind or if more could exist. Some believed it was a transitional experiment that accidentally escaped the mint, possibly part of a test run for new dye treatments. Others dismissed the theory, insisting it was simply a rare but explainable mechanical mistake. But what no one could deny was its beauty. It was the kind of error coin that captured the imagination, the kind of coin that people would remember forever. Auction houses began whispering early estimates: 100 million, 150 million, maybe more. Some dared to speculate that if authenticated as a mint experiment, it could rival the $212 million valuation itself. Alicia, overwhelmed by the sudden attention, decided to keep the coin locked away while experts continued studying it. The mystery surrounding it only added to its value. And through all of this, the idea grew stronger. The 1989 cent wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a phenomenon, a cultural wave, a modern-day treasure hunt unfolding in real time. The kind of story that made people believe again in the magic of discovery, the thrill of the unknown, the possibility that something extraordinary could be hiding in the most ordinary places. And with every new error uncovered, every new rumor investigated, every new auction record broken, the world inched closer to answering the question everyone wanted to know: where is the single perfect specimen? The flawless or nearly flawless 1989 cent that the numismatic world believes could be worth a staggering $212 million. Some believe it's already been found, sitting quietly in a private vault. Others think it's still out there, waiting in a jar in someone's kitchen, waiting in circulation, waiting in a forgotten storage box. And some believe it will reveal itself at the exact moment the world needs a reminder that miracles still exist. As the excitement surrounding the 1989 1-cent coin continued to build, the lines between fact, rumor, speculation, and raw hope began to blur. What started as a simple curiosity had now grown into a full-blown nationwide hunt, a movement that reached beyond collectors and into the everyday lives of ordinary people. Families that had never cared about coins suddenly began gathering around dining tables, pouring piles of pennies into bowls, separating them by year, shining flashlights across their surfaces, and debating whether a tiny shadow near the date was a real doubling or just a trick of the light. The 1989 cent had become a unifying force, a topic that crossed generations, cultures, and backgrounds, binding everyone with a simple question: what if the rare one is mine? Social media exploded with pictures of magnified dates and mint marks. Online groups dedicated to the 1989 penny multiplied overnight. People posted every tiny variation they found, hoping theirs would be the one that sparked the next discovery. Some uploaded shaky videos recorded in dimly lit rooms, their voices trembling as they described an odd texture or strange line on the reverse. Others confidently displayed coins that turned out to be ordinary, Yet the enthusiasm never faded. Every new post, every new image, every new conversation seemed to add another spark to the wildfire that had engulfed the coin-collecting world. And yet, despite the thousands of coins being examined each day, despite the countless hands sifting through jars and bags and boxes, the true monster of the legend, the perfectly rare, undeniably unique, multi-hundred-million-dollar 1989 cent, remained elusive. Not a single expert could confidently point to a specific coin and say, "This is the one." And the mystery surrounding that missing specimen only made it more desirable, more mythical. Collectors began to analyze patterns, searching for clues in places most people would never think to look. Some studied the geography of where error coins were being found, noticing that a surprising number seemed to originate from the Midwest. Others dug into old mint shipment records, hoping to trace the movement of planchets from distributors to their final destinations. A few enthusiasts even believed the rarest 1989 cents could be concentrated in specific bank storage facilities that may still hold unrolled, untouched bags of pennies from the late 80s. Bank workers started receiving unusual requests from people begging to buy old sealed bags of cents, and some banks, confused by the sudden demand, even questioned whether a new cryptocurrency or financial trend was happening. But while all this unfolded, something quietly stirred behind the scenes. Private collectors who rarely revealed their holdings began stepping forward, each hoping that their possession might be the missing masterpiece. A wealthy businessman from Texas claimed he owned a 1989 cent with a misalignment so precise that it appeared intentional. A numismatist in California said he had a specimen with early signs of die fatigue on the obverse that created a soft, almost ghost-like portrait of Lincoln. Another collector in New York announced he had a coin with a razor-sharp strike and unusual brightness, insisting it might have come from a freshly polished die used only briefly before being retired. Auction houses watched all this unfold like hawks, ready to move the moment the right coin emerged. Their specialists quietly contacted these private holders, requesting high-resolution images, detailed scans, even metallurgical readings, if available. Some coins impressed them. Some coins confused them. Some coins created debates that lasted for weeks. But none yet carried the overwhelming combination of uniqueness, error profile, beauty, condition, and mystery required to justify a $212 million valuation. And then the whispers started. Whispers about a coin that seemed too perfect, too unusual, too flawless in its strangeness. A coin that allegedly had been passed down quietly from one collector to another without ever entering the auction circuit. Some claimed it was found decades ago, before anyone had reason to suspect the 1989 cent could become valuable. Some believed it had been discovered in a bag from the Denver Mint that had never been opened until the early 2000s. The description of the coin changed with every retelling. Some said it had a high-relief strike. Others said the plating was abnormally thick. Others said it had a visible die crack running from Lincoln's jacket to the rim. But what remained consistent in every version of the rumor was that this coin was unlike anything seen before at first. Experts dismissed the story as the typical folklore that surrounds valuable collectibles. Every great treasure has its mythic lost piece, and the 1989 cent was no different. But then something unexpected happened. A well-respected grading consultant, known for his strict standards and ability to identify even the tiniest of minting discrepancies, mentioned in a private interview that he had once seen a 1989 cent that left him speechless. He refused to describe it. He refused to identify the owner. He refused to confirm whether he had graded it or simply examined it. But the way he spoke, the hesitation, the seriousness, the deliberate pacing of his words, suggested that the mythical specimen might truly exist. This revelation fueled the frenzy. Coin hunters doubled their efforts. Veterans in the collecting world quietly began rechecking their personal vaults. Dealers who had dismissed the 1989 cent as just another modern penny suddenly found themselves wishing they had kept every one they had ever handled. Some people even began traveling to coin shows across the country, not to buy or sell, but to search, to ask questions, to compare notes with others who shared the same obsession. What made the 1989 cent so powerful was not just the possibility of wealth, though that was certainly part of its allure. It was the emotional energy behind it, the idea that a tiny, almost weightless object something worth only 1 cent by design, could transform a life instantly. The idea that destiny could be hiding inside a penny you've walked past 1,000 times. The idea that the universe sometimes hides miracles inside ordinary things, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. Among the thousands of people now searching, one stood out: a quiet man named Robert. He had no social media presence, no flashy videos, no dramatic claims. What he did have was patience, endless patience. For years, he had searched through coins as a hobby, never expecting anything life-changing. He worked nights cleaning office buildings, and every time he emptied vending machines, every time he checked coin trays, he kept the more interesting pieces aside. He didn't do it for money. He did it because he enjoyed the quiet moments of discovery. One night, while his co-workers laughed in the break room, Robert sat alone with his magnifier, examining a group of pennies he had set aside earlier. One coin caught his eye immediately: a 1989 cent, darker in tone, unusually heavy in his hand. At first he thought he was imagining it. How could a penny feel heavier? But then he placed it on a digital scale and saw the number jump slightly higher than normal. His hands began to shake. He wiped the scale, tried again. Same result, but he didn't sleep that night. He examined the coin under every type of light he had available: warm light, cold light, LED flashlight, even the flashlight from his phone. The surface shimmered strangely, not smooth like a typical zinc cent, but layered, textured, almost geological. The rim had an unnatural thickness. The date seemed to have a faint doubling on the bottom curve of the 9. The reverse showed signs of a misaligned pressure strike, but the details were sharper than any circulation coin had the right to be. He didn't know what he had, but he knew it wasn't ordinary. And the moment his story spreads, everything changes. The night Robert discovered the strange 1989 cent felt endless. The more he examined it, the more unusual details he uncovered. It was as if the coin kept revealing new secrets each time he shifted the light. The texture on the surface didn't behave like normal copper plating. It reflected too softly, too evenly, as though the metal had settled differently during the striking process. The weight continued to bother him more than anything else. He couldn't ignore it. Every scale he tried showed the same anomaly: heavier than a standard 1989 cent, but not heavy enough to be a coin from the pre-1982 Bronze era. It fell in a strange, impossible middle ground, like it belonged to a composition that shouldn't exist. As the hours ticked by, the silence of his small apartment amplified the beating of his heart. He had found unusual coins before: minor doubling, small die cracks, a few dramatic off-center strikes, but nothing like this. This was different. This coin didn't behave like a mistake. It behaved like an experiment, as if someone at the mint had tried something new, something unrecorded, something that escaped into the wild without anyone noticing. And that thought sent a chill through him. What if this was the coin people whispered about? The mythical 1989 cent that experts debated behind closed doors but never publicly acknowledged. The one that collectors believe could be worth more than entire vaults of rare coins. The one rumored to possess errors and characteristics so unique that no other example could ever match it. Unable to contain his curiosity, Robert placed the coin gently in a small protective flip and slipped it into his jacket pocket before leaving for work the next morning. The world outside looked the same, but everything felt different. The buses, the sidewalks, the streetlights. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had changed. Because now he carried something with him that might hold an unbelievable story, an unimaginable fortune, or possibly nothing at all. But the possibility was what made his hands tremble. At work, he didn't tell anyone. How could he? How do you tell someone that you might be holding a penny worth more than a mansion, more than an island, more than a lifetime of dreams? People would laugh, dismiss him, or worse, try to take it from him. So he kept the secret buried deep inside. But the secret grew heavier with each passing hour. That evening, after finishing his shift, he took the bus across town to visit a small coin shop he had been going to for years. The owner, an older man named Daniel, had been a mentor of sorts, patient, knowledgeable, always willing to explain details others overlooked. If anyone could offer an honest initial opinion, it was Daniel. But when Robert walked into the shop that evening, something felt different. The lights were softer, the air quieter, the shelves lined with years of memories. Daniel looked up from the counter and greeted him with a warm smile. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he joked. But when Robert placed the coin flip on the counter and slid it forward, his expression changed instantly. Daniel didn't speak. He just stared at the coin through the plastic window, leaning in closer as if drawn to it. Then silently, he reached into the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out his magnifier. The moment he held the coin up to the light, the atmosphere in the room shifted. His smile faded. His eyebrows tensed. His body turned rigid, like he had just stumbled across something impossible. "What? Where did you get this?" Daniel finally whispered, his voice tight with disbelief, but Robert didn't answer. He wanted Daniel's unbiased reaction, and he could see clearly that something about the coin had shaken the veteran shop owner. Daniel examined the obverse first, his eyes scanning Lincoln's portrait, the date, the curvature of the rim, the faint doubling near the lower loop of the 9. Then he flipped the coin over, studying the reverse with an almost reverent caution. After what felt like eternity, Daniel placed the magnifier down, closed his eyes, and exhaled slowly. "I've never seen anything like this," he said quietly. "Not in 30 years of collecting. Not in books. Not in auctions. Not anywhere." The way he spoke, the quiet certainty in his tone, made Robert's chest tighten. He wasn't imagining things. This coin really was something extraordinary. Daniel pulled out a scale and placed the coin on it with the precision of a surgeon. When the display lit up, he froze. The number didn't make sense. It confirmed exactly what Robert had seen, but Daniel couldn't reconcile it with any known minting history. The weight hovered between the bronze coins of early 1980s and the zinc coins of the late 80s, landing in a range that should have been impossible for any mint-authorized planchet in 1989. "It's a hybrid weight," Daniel whispered. "That shouldn't exist. Not legally. Not mechanically. Not under any documented condition." Then he inspected the plating under a different light, revealing subtle layers in the metal, like geological formations compressed over time. "This isn't surface damage," he murmured. "This is structural. It's inside the metal itself." The more Daniel examined, the more confused he became. The rim thickness was inconsistent, yet not in a way typical of misaligned strikes. The texture of the surface resembled an unfinished experimental satin planchet. The memorial pillars had faint distortion, but the strike on the roofline was razor-sharp. It contradicted everything he knew about minting errors. "This coin has multiple anomalies," Daniel said finally, "but they don't clash. They align. They tell a story." He paused, then added in a tone so soft it was barely audible. "This is not a normal error coin. This could be a prototype." That word hit Robert like a shockwave. Prototype. A coin that wasn't supposed to exist. A test strike minted before production. A piece of history smuggled out unintentionally. Something so rare that even the mint might not know it survived. Prototype coins are the holy grail of numismatics. Some sell for tens of millions. Some are priceless. And if a prototype from a year like 1989 existed, a year already clouded with odd inconsistencies, it could be worth not just millions, but potentially more than any coin ever sold in American history. Daniel looked at Robert with an expression he had never seen before, a mixture of awe, fear, and respect. "If this is what I think it is," he whispered, "then your life is about to change." That night, as Robert walked home under the streetlights, he held the coin close to his chest, feeling its weight through the fabric of his jacket. The city around him carried on as normal, unaware that inside his pocket lay a piece of metal that might redefine everything the numismatic world thought it knew. He wasn't just holding a coin. He was holding a secret the world wasn't ready for. A discovery that could ignite the biggest coin frenzy in history. A treasure so rare that people might cross continents just to see it. And as he stepped into the quiet darkness of his apartment, one thought repeated endlessly in his mind, refusing to let him sleep. The days that followed were a blur for Robert. Every moment, every sound, every notification on his phone felt like it carried hidden significance. He couldn't stop thinking about the coin in his pocket. He couldn't stop picturing the faint doubling near the date, the unusual weight, the layered texture, the subtle distortion of the Lincoln Memorial's pillars. It wasn't just a coin anymore. It was a living puzzle, a secret waiting for the right person to reveal it, and Robert suddenly realized that by holding it, he had become a custodian of history. Word had not yet spread beyond Daniel's quiet workshop, But Robert knew it was only a matter of time. In the coin world, news travels fast, too fast, sometimes. Rare discoveries become headlines before their owners are ready, and the right, or wrong, rumor can transform a single coin into a global sensation overnight. Robert kept it hidden, locked away in a small, fireproof safe he had bought years ago for his modest collection. But the pressure of secrecy was intense. Every knock at the door, every unexpected visitor, every call from an unknown number made his heart race. Meanwhile, the wider collector community was already in overdrive. Social media platforms were flooded with discussions, photographs, and theories about 1989 cents. The nickname Year of Shadows had become a permanent fixture in coin forums. Collectors debated every detail: the subtle doubling in the lower loop of the 9, the thickness variations in the rim, the unusual reflections on the surface. Videos demonstrating magnification techniques and grading procedures went viral. Auction houses held emergency meetings, preparing for a potential surge in consignments. The industry was ready to erupt the moment someone brought forward the coin that could challenge the record-breaking $212 million legend. In private, Daniel began preparing Robert for the next steps. "We need experts," he said cautiously. "People who can authenticate it properly. People who can confirm whether it's a prototype or something entirely unique. If this gets out in the wrong way, someone could try to take it from you. Or worse, discredit it before it's even verified." His voice carried the weight of decades of experience, the kind of authority that only comes from navigating the high-stakes world of rare coins for years. The authentication process was daunting. Robert had to send the coin under strict conditions to several independent grading services, each specializing in modern errors, anomalies, and prototypes. Experts analyzed every surface with microscopes, measured weight and diameter with extreme precision, and used lighting to reveal micro-details invisible to the naked eye. Metallurgists tested the composition, confirming that the zinc and copper layering matched neither standard 1989 cents nor earlier bronze planchets, hinting at a rare experimental production process. Numismatic historians cross-referenced mint records, looking for anything that could explain its origin. Every examination seemed to confirm the impossible. This coin might be the single most unique 1989 cent ever struck, AS reports returned. The numismatic world began buzzing with hints of what might be happening. A few private collectors and dealers, informed through discreet channels, began whispering about an unprecedented find. Rumors spread faster than wildfire, as they always do in rare coin circles. The idea that someone could be holding a coin potentially worth hundreds of millions of dollars electrified every collector, dealer, and historian who caught wind of it. Media outlets were also starting to pick up the story. A few journalists specializing in collectibles had caught rumors of a discovery that could shake the coin world. Television producers began planning segments, eager to broadcast the tale of the elusive 1989 penny and its mythic valuation. The story was no longer just a collector's obsession. It had become a cultural phenomenon, a symbol of the power of chance, precision, and human curiosity. But along with excitement came tension. Stories of theft, fraud, and counterfeit prototypes were nothing new in the numismatic community. The more valuable a coin, the more dangerous it becomes. Robert and Daniel knew that any public revelation would attract attention, not always friendly. They had to move carefully, balancing secrecy with the need to validate the coin's authenticity. Every photograph had to be controlled. Every discussion about its features had to be precise. A single mistake could ruin the entire discovery. Meanwhile, collectors around the globe continued their search for 1989 cents. Each minor error discovered, each unusual doubling or off-center strike found in circulation, only intensified the mystery. People began questioning the official production numbers, speculating on undisclosed test dies, and re-examining the history of the mint itself. Historians dug into obscure documents from the late 1980s, searching for discrepancies, misrecorded shipments, and notes about experimental dies. The more they researched, the more plausible it seemed that a unique prototype could have escaped unnoticed, hidden among billions of ordinary coins. As the world waited, Robert's anticipation grew. Every day, he checked the coin, studied it under his magnifier, and considered the implications of what he was holding. Could this really be the legendary coin worth $212 million? Could it be the single coin that would eclipse every modern numismatic record ever set? Or was it an incredibly rare but still finite error coin, destined to fetch millions but not quite the ultimate prize? The uncertainty was unbearable, but also exhilarating. Then came the moment of preliminary verification. Daniel, after weeks of cautious investigation and private consultations with trusted experts, confirmed that Robert's coin displayed all the hallmarks of an experimental prototype, with characteristics unmatched by any other 1989 cent known to exist. Multiple experts independently verified the features: the unusual surface layering, the weight anomaly, the faint but precise doubling, the irregular rim, and the subtle die textures. Each feature told the same story. This was not a circulation coin. This was something far rarer, something historic. Word spread quietly at first, then more widely. Collectors and dealers whispered about the find in hushed tones. Auction houses prepared to make arrangements for authentication and potential sale. The media began assembling background stories about the legend of the 1989 penny and its $212 million mythos. And through it all, Robert remained vigilant, aware that once this coin was known to the world, nothing would ever be the same again. The 1989 cent had gone from a simple coin in circulation to a symbol of possibility, mystery, and wonder. It had survived decades unnoticed, hidden in plain sight, carrying the secret of an experimental die, the rarest errors, and the perfect storm of minting anomalies. And now, in Robert's hands, it was about to rewrite history. The final steps toward revelation were both thrilling and terrifying. Robert had held the coin in secrecy for weeks, feeling the weight of history pressing against his palm, the almost imperceptible vibrations of possibility coursing through his every thought. Each night he lay awake, imagining the moment the world would finally see what he held, wondering whether anyone could truly understand the magnitude of a single penny from 1989 that defied every expectation. This wasn't just a coin. It was a living chronicle of chance, precision, human error, and the secret brilliance of a minting process that had inadvertently created a legend. The day of the public authentication arrived. A team of top experts, metallurgists, numismatic historians, and grading specialists gathered in Daniel's carefully arranged workshop. The air was tense, electric with anticipation. Cameras silently documented the process, not for viral spectacle, but for historical verification. Robert, standing quietly in the corner, felt a mix of dread and exhilaration. When the coin was finally placed under the first microscope, its surface shimmered in the light, revealing layers of detail that no ordinary penny could ever possess. Every expert leaned in, their faces taut with disbelief. "The layering is unmatched," said one metallurgist, his voice low and deliberate. "The zinc and copper plating show anomalies that indicate a prototype die, likely experimental, never recorded in official mint records. The weight, the rim, the die lines, this is exceptional. I've never seen anything like it in my career." A numismatic historian nodded, scanning the reverse. "The memorial shows evidence of subtle die polish stages and finishing lines that were never used in circulation strikes. This confirms that it is an experimental or transitional die. Combined with the other features, this is without question a one-of-a-kind specimen." Silence fell over the room. Robert's heart pounded. He had hoped, dreamed, and feared this moment, but now that it had arrived, reality felt heavier than any fantasy. A coin worth millions, perhaps over $200 million, rested quietly in a flip between his fingers. The world had no idea, yet this tiny piece of metal carried more history, mystery, and fascination than most people could imagine. Once the findings were documented, the grading specialists began preparing the coin for certification and secure presentation. Experts debated how to describe it in public records. Prototype? Experimental die? Unique mint anomaly? All agreed on one thing. This was the pinnacle of modern numismatics, a coin that would define the year 1989 forever, a coin that would forever inspire collectors, historians, and dreamers alike. News of the verification leaked slowly, carefully, to avoid chaos, but the story spread like wildfire. Within hours, social media platforms were ablaze with speculation. Articles appeared, interviews were scheduled, and coin collectors around the world held their breath, imagining what it must be like to hold in your hands a coin worth hundreds of millions. Auction houses prepared their most secure facilities, anticipating global attention, eager to showcase a specimen that had literally rewritten the value and allure of a single 1-cent coin. Robert, who had begun as an ordinary collector, suddenly found himself at the center of history. He had discovered not only a coin but a narrative of wonder, a story that spanned decades of minting, secrecy, and chance. And he realized that the true value of the coin wasn't merely in dollars. It was in the ripple it created. Families bonding over coin hunts, young collectors inspired to examine everyday objects with curiosity, historians rediscovering forgotten details of mint operations, and ordinary people believing again in the magic hidden in plain sight. When the coin finally appeared publicly, carefully displayed under protective glass at a major numismatic convention, the reaction was overwhelming. Crowds gathered, cameras flashed, and experts spoke reverently about its rarity. Even seasoned collectors, who had handled millions of coins in their lives, could hardly believe their eyes. The penny that once slipped unnoticed through circulation now commanded awe and respect worthy of any historical artifact. The final auction estimate confirmed the legend: $212 million. A sum that seemed almost mythical for a coin worth 1 cent in its origin, but a sum fully justified by its uniqueness, beauty, and the story it carried. When the auction closed, it shattered records, cementing the 1989 cent's place as the most extraordinary modern coin ever discovered. Headlines around the world proclaimed the story: the ordinary penny that became extraordinary, the mistake that turned into legend, the coin that reminded humanity that even the smallest object can hold the greatest value. Robert, reflecting on the journey, understood something profound. The coin had changed lives, not just his own. It had sparked curiosity, wonder, and a renewed fascination with history, design, and the subtle art of minting. The 1989 penny, once overlooked, had become a symbol of possibility, proof that the smallest details can hide the largest stories, that chance and error can create beauty, and that even the humblest of objects can leave an indelible mark on history. And as the exhibition lights dimmed and the coin was secured in its protective case, Robert looked at it one last time. The engraved face of Lincoln seemed to smile faintly, as if acknowledging the journey, the curiosity, the human fascination that had carried it from an unnoticed circulation coin to the crown jewel of numismatics. The story was complete, yet it would live forever, inspiring collectors, dreamers, and historians for generations to come. The 1989 cent was no longer just a coin. It was a legend, a masterpiece born of error, a testament to curiosity, and the most remarkable 1-cent story the world would ever know. The legend had found its ending, a perfect conclusion to a journey that began in quiet circulation, passed through decades of obscurity, and erupted into history as the world's most celebrated modern penny.